Months passed, and the once glamorous world of Alexander Carter underwent a profound transformation, not just for him, but for everyone who had been touched by the events surrounding Evelyn and Sarah. The divorce proceedings concluded quietly, with Alexander walking away relieved and unburdened. Sarah, on the other hand, found herself stripped of the life she had clung to so desperately. Her name faded from society pages, replaced by whispers of her downfall, a stark reminder that wealth without character is fleeting. Sarah eventually sold the mansion, unable to bear its emptiness or the memories it held. She moved into a modest apartment downtown, far removed from the opulent lifestyle she once cherished. At first, she tried to maintain appearances, frequenting high-end cafes and clinging to designer labels as if they could shield her from reality. But over time, her facade crumbled. Stripped of her status and forced to confront her own insecurities, Sarah began to see how her obsession with power and privilege had blinded her to what truly mattered: genuine connection, kindness, and self-worth. Though redemption came too late for her marriage, it planted a seed of reflection, one she would carry for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, Alexander thrived in ways he never imagined. Free from the constraints of a toxic relationship, he dedicated himself fully to causes close to his heart. Working alongside Evelyn at the community center became more than just a hobby, it became his purpose. Together, they launched initiatives to support underprivileged children, providing them access to education, mentorship, and opportunities they might not otherwise have had. The penthouse Alexander gifted Evelyn became a hub for volunteers and donors, its walls adorned with photos of smiling faces whose lives were transformed by their efforts. Evelyn, for her part, remained the same humble woman she had always been. Though strangers now recognized her name and praised her work, she stayed grounded, focusing on the people she served rather than accolades. Her bond with Alexander deepened, their shared mission strengthening the familial ties they had nurtured for decades. To outsiders, it was clear that Evelyn wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was a guiding force, a symbol of resilience and compassion that inspired everyone around her. The ripple effects of Alexander's decision extended beyond their immediate circle. Friends and acquaintances who had initially judged Evelyn, or worse, dismissed her, began to rethink their priorities. Some started volunteering at local shelters, while others reconnected with estranged family members, realizing too late the importance of relationships over riches. Even distant relatives who had mocked Evelyn's simplicity reached out to express admiration for her quiet strength. In honoring her, Alexander inadvertently sparked a wave of change, reminding those around him that true wealth lies in character, not bank accounts. As winter approached, Alexander hosted a small gathering at his estate, not for business or show, but to celebrate the people who mattered most. Evelyn sat beside him, glowing with pride as guests shared stories of how his generosity had impacted their lives. There were no flashy decorations or extravagant meals, just heartfelt conversations and laughter filling the room. It was a night that embodied everything Alexander had come to value: authenticity, love, and gratitude. Looking back, Alexander knew his journey hadn't been easy. Divorcing Sarah had been painful, and stepping away from the superficial world he once inhabited required courage. But as he watched Evelyn laugh with newfound friends and saw the joy on the faces of the children they helped, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had finally built a life rooted in meaning, a legacy shaped not by money, but by the lessons Evelyn had taught him long ago. And so, the story came full circle. A millionaire's wife had humiliated a humble nanny, only for the millionaire to rise above bitterness and reclaim his humanity. Through one bold act of gratitude, Alexander proved that even amidst brokenness, there is hope, and that choosing kindness over cruelty can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. In the days following the disastrous brunch, Sarah's world began to crumble around her. Her dramatic exit had been witnessed by nearly everyone in attendance, and within hours, rumors spread like wildfire through their social circle. Friends whispered behind closed doors about her outburst, while acquaintances debated whether Alexander's decision to honor Evelyn was justified or excessive. For someone who prided herself on maintaining a flawless image, Sarah found herself drowning in a sea of judgment and pity. At first, she tried to salvage her reputation. She called mutual friends, spinning tales of how misunderstood she was, claiming that Alexander had blindsided her with his announcement. "It's not about Evelyn," she insisted during one phone call, her voice trembling with false sincerity. "It's about him throwing away our future for some misplaced sense of guilt. Doesn't he realize what this will do to us, to our family?" But her efforts fell flat. Many of their so-called friends seemed more entertained than sympathetic, relishing the drama unfolding in the Carter household. Others openly sided with Alexander, praising him for standing up to Sarah's cruelty. The isolation gnawed at her, leaving her feeling increasingly cornered and desperate. Meanwhile, Alexander filed for divorce, a move that sent shockwaves through the community. Though he handled the process with quiet dignity, it was clear his patience with Sarah had run out. He no longer wanted to live a life overshadowed by her selfishness and lack of empathy. During settlement discussions, Sarah demanded an exorbitant share of their assets, arguing that she deserved compensation for years of supporting his career. But Alexander refused to indulge her greed, offering only what was fair under the law. As the legal battle dragged on, Sarah retreated further into herself. She stopped attending social events, unable to face the smirks and side-eye glances from people who once fawned over her. Her designer clothes gathered dust in the closet, and her perfectly curated Instagram feed went dark. Without the validation of wealth and status, Sarah realized how hollow her existence truly was. Back at the estate, Alexander embraced a simpler, more meaningful way of life. He spent more time with Evelyn, joining her at the community center where she mentored children. Together, they organized workshops and fundraisers, using their resources to uplift those in need. The experience reignited Alexander's passion for giving back, a value Evelyn had instilled in him long ago. Slowly but surely, he rediscovered the joy of living authentically, unburdened by pretense or materialism. Evelyn, too, settled into her new penthouse apartment, though she used it as a base for her charitable work rather than indulging in luxury. She filled the space with books, plants, and handmade crafts, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. Word of her generosity spread throughout the city, earning her admiration from strangers and colleagues alike. People marveled at how someone so humble could inspire such profound change. For Sarah, however, there was no redemption arc. Stripped of her title as Millionaire's wife, she became a cautionary tale, a woman whose obsession with status blinded her to what truly mattered. Alone in their now empty mansion, surrounded by remnants of a life she could no longer recognize, Sarah confronted the harsh truth. She had lost everything because she valued the wrong things. And yet, amidst the chaos, something beautiful emerged. Alexander's choice to honor Evelyn transformed not only his own life, but also inspired those around him to reflect on their values. Friends and acquaintances began volunteering at local charities, prioritizing relationships over possessions, and seeking fulfillment beyond wealth. In honoring the woman who raised him, Alexander reminded everyone of the power of gratitude, kindness, and integrity, qualities that money could never buy. The next family gathering was held just 2 weeks later, though the atmosphere felt markedly different from the celebratory tone of Alexander's birthday dinner. This time, the occasion was a casual brunch hosted at the Carter estate, with close relatives and a few trusted friends in attendance. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation. Everyone had heard whispers about Alexander's recent decision to gift Evelyn a luxurious penthouse apartment. Speculation ran rampant, and Sarah, dressed impeccably as always, arrived with a forced smile plastered across her face. As the guests mingled over coffee and pastries, Alexander stood up from his seat at the head of the table, clearing his throat to capture everyone's attention. His demeanor was calm but resolute, exuding the authority that came naturally to him. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and clear. "I wanted to take a moment to share some news about someone very special to me." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Evelyn, who sat quietly near the corner of the room. She looked elegant yet modest in a simple floral dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. A few guests exchanged curious glances, while others leaned forward in their chairs, eager to hear what Alexander had to say. "Evelyn Harper has been more than just a nanny to me," he continued, his tone filled with emotion. "She's been my mentor, my guide, and in many ways, my second mother. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today. And it's high time I showed her the gratitude she deserves." With that, he announced the details of his gift: a stunning penthouse in the heart of the city, complete with breathtaking views and every modern convenience imaginable. He explained that the monthly stipend would ensure Evelyn's comfort for the rest of her life. The room erupted into applause, with several guests expressing admiration for Alexander's generosity. But Sarah, seated beside him, remained eerily silent. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her knuckles widened as she gripped the edge of the table. When the clapping finally subsided, she spoke up, her voice cutting through the lingering murmurs like a knife. "Generous," she echoed sarcastically, her eyes narrowing. "Is that what we're calling it? Throwing away our hard-earned money on someone who doesn't even belong in our circle? Tell me, Alexander, did you stop to think about how this makes the rest of us look?" Her outburst drew stunned silence from the room. Even Evelyn seemed taken aback by the venom in Sarah's words. Alexander, however, didn't flinch. He turned to face his wife, his expression cold and unyielding. "This isn't throwing away anything," he replied firmly. "It's an investment in someone who invested everything in me. Evelyn gave me the foundation I needed to succeed. If you can't respect that, if you can't see beyond your own selfishness, then maybe you don't belong beside me." Sarah's jaw dropped, her cheeks flushing with anger and embarrassment. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed, rising to her feet. "I've stood by you, supported you, built this life with you, and now you're choosing her over me." "I'm not choosing anyone over you," Alexander shot back, his voice rising slightly. "I'm honoring the people who truly matter. You had your chance to show kindness, Sarah, to prove that you care about something more than status and appearances. But last night proved exactly who you are, and I won't stand for it anymore." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah stared at him, disbelief etched across her face, before turning on her heel and storming out of the room. Her dramatic exit left behind a wave of shock, but Alexander didn't chase after her. Instead, he turned back to Evelyn and the guests, offering a small, apologetic smile. "Let's continue enjoying the day," he said softly, his voice tinged with sadness. "And let this serve as a reminder of what really matters: gratitude, love, and respect." As the brunch resumed, whispers spread among the guests about the unraveling of Alexander and Sarah's marriage. For Evelyn, the moment was bittersweet. She never wanted to cause discord, but she couldn't deny the sense of justice in seeing Alexander finally stand up for what was right. Little did they know, Sarah's reaction would only deepen the rifts within the family, setting the stage for even greater changes ahead. The next morning, the sun rose over the quiet countryside, casting golden light through the windows of Evelyn's modest cottage. Nestled on the edge of town, the small home was a reflection of her simple yet contented life. Flower pots lined the porch, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafted from the kitchen. Evelyn sat at her wooden table, sipping tea and reading an old novel, trying to put the events of the previous night behind her. She had always believed in rising above negativity, but Sarah's words lingered like an unwelcome shadow. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Setting her cup down, Evelyn opened it to find Alexander standing there, his expression a mix of determination and regret. His usual confident demeanor seemed tempered by something deeper, a resolve that hinted at change. "Good morning, Evelyn," he said warmly, stepping inside when she invited him in. He looked around the cozy living room, taking in the familiar sights. Faded photographs on the walls, hand-stitched quilts draped over furniture, and shelves filled with books she had collected over decades. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of his estate, but it radiated warmth and character. "I wanted to check on you," Alexander began, sitting across from her at the table. "After last night, I'm so sorry for how Sarah treated you. I should have stepped in sooner." Evelyn shook her head gently, her voice soft but firm. "You don't need to apologize for someone else's actions, dear. I've dealt with worse in my lifetime. What matters is that you're here now." Her kindness only deepened Alexander's guilt. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Still, it wasn't fair. You've given me everything. Your love, your guidance, your sacrifice. And this is how you're repaid. No, Evelyn. It's time I made sure you never have to worry about anything ever again." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Alexander took a deep breath, his mind already made up. "I bought you a penthouse apartment in the city, a place where you can live comfortably, without having to lift a finger if you choose. There's also a monthly stipend to cover any expenses you might have. I want you to enjoy the fruits of the life you helped me build." Evelyn blinked in surprise, her teacup pausing midway to her lips. "Alexander, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, but I don't need all that. This little cottage suits me just fine." "I know it does," he replied with a smile. "But it's not about need. It's about gratitude. You've done so much for me, and I want to give back. Please, let me do this for you." Touched by his sincerity, Evelyn hesitated before nodding slowly. "If it means that much to you, then I'll accept. But on one condition, you must promise me that I can continue doing what I love. Volunteering at the community center, mentoring children, helping those in need. Those things are part of who I am." Alexander grinned, relief washing over him. "Of course, Evelyn. I wouldn't dream of taking that away from you. In fact, I'd like to help expand your efforts. Together, we could make an even bigger difference." As they talked, the weight of the past began to lift. Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose, while Alexander found solace in knowing he was finally honoring the woman who had shaped his life. Outside, birds chirped cheerfully, as if celebrating the start of something new. Unbeknownst to them, however, Sarah watched from afar, jealousy burning in her chest as she pieced together what had happened. The seeds of resentment planted the night before were growing into something far darker, and her next move would test the strength of everyone involved. The clock struck midnight as the last of the guests departed, their laughter and chatter fading into the cool night air. Alexander stood by the front door, bidding them farewell with polite smiles and handshakes, though his mind was elsewhere. The evening had been a blur of celebration, but something felt off, like an invisible storm cloud hovering just beyond his awareness. As he closed the heavy oak door behind the final guest, he turned to find Evelyn quietly gathering her things near the staircase. "Evelyn," he called out, his voice tinged with concern. "Are you all right?" She looked up, startled for a moment before offering him a small, reassuring smile. "Of course, dear. Just tired, that's all." Alexander hesitated, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. Before he could press further, Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her expression was unreadable, but the tension between her and Evelyn was palpable. Without a word, she descended the steps and brushed past Evelyn, heading straight for the living room. Something inside Alexander snapped. He excused himself briefly, telling Evelyn he'd be right back, and followed Sarah into the dimly lit room. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Sarah stood by the mantelpiece, pouring herself a glass of wine with exaggerated calmness. "What was that about in the kitchen?" Alexander demanded, his tone sharper than usual. Sarah didn't turn around immediately, sipping her wine as if buying time. When she finally faced him, Her expression was a mix of defiance and irritation. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Alexander shot back, his voice rising slightly. "I heard what you said to Evelyn, mocking her clothes, accusing her of clinging to me for favors. Was that really necessary?" Sarah rolled her eyes, setting the glass down with a deliberate clink. "Oh, come on, Alexander. Don't act like you didn't notice how out of place she was tonight. She doesn't belong here. This is our world now, not hers." "Our world," Alexander repeated, incredulous. "You think wealth defines where someone belongs. Evelyn raised me when I had nothing. She gave me everything. Values, strength, guidance. Without her, I wouldn't even be standing here." Sarah scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "That's sweet and all, but we're not children anymore. You don't need a nanny holding your hand or reminding you of the good old days. Honestly, it's embarrassing." "Embarrassing," Alexander echoed, his anger bubbling closer to the surface. "You want to talk about embarrassment? Watching my own wife humiliate someone who means so much to me. That's what's embarrassing. You treated her like she was beneath you, Sarah, like she didn't matter." "She doesn't matter," Sarah snapped, losing her composure for the first time. "Not in the way you're making it seem. She's just a nanny, Alexander. A glorified babysitter. Why are you acting like she's some kind of saint?" Alexander stared at her, stunned by the venom in her words. For years, he had overlooked Sarah's flaws, her obsession with status, her cutting remarks, her inability to see value beyond material possessions. But tonight, her true colors were on full display, and he couldn't ignore them any longer. "Evelyn isn't just anything," he said quietly, his voice laced with disappointment. "She's family, and if you can't respect that, then maybe you don't understand what really matters." Without waiting for a response, Alexander turned and walked out of the room, leaving Sarah standing alone amidst the dying embers of the fire, his fists clenched at his sides as he made his way to the foyer, where Evelyn was still waiting patiently. "I'm sorry," he said earnestly, his voice trembling with emotion, "for everything she said to you tonight. It was wrong, and it won't happen again." Evelyn placed a gentle hand on his arm, her eyes filled with understanding. "It's not your fault, Alexander. Don't trouble yourself over me." But Alexander couldn't shake the weight of what had transpired. As he stormed out of the house into the quiet night, his mind raced with thoughts of how far Sarah had strayed from the person he thought she was, and how much Evelyn deserved better than this. After the dessert plates were cleared, and the guests began to drift into smaller groups, Evelyn quietly excused herself from the table. She wasn't comfortable being the center of attention for too long, and the weight of Sarah's earlier comments had already started to wear on her. With a polite smile, she slipped away toward the kitchen, hoping to help clear some dishes. It was a habit she'd carried with her all these years, finding comfort in staying busy. But Sarah, still simmering with resentment, followed her. The kitchen was alive with activity as staff bustled about, packing leftovers and washing utensils. Evelyn stood by the counter, carefully stacking plates to carry them to the sink. When Sarah entered, the room seemed to grow quieter, though no one dared to pause their tasks. Everyone could sense the tension radiating off her. "Evelyn," Sarah called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the hum of conversation. "You don't need to do that. We have people for this." Her tone dripped with disdain, as if suggesting Evelyn didn't belong among the polished surroundings of the Carter estate. Evelyn turned slowly, meeting Sarah's gaze with calm eyes. "It's all right," she replied softly. "I don't mind helping. Old habits die hard." Sarah let out a short, humorless laugh, folding her arms across her chest. "Old habits? Yes, I suppose they do." She stepped closer, lowering her voice, but ensuring it remained loud enough for the nearby staff to overhear. "Tell me, Evelyn, what exactly are you doing here tonight? This is a celebration for Alexander's success, a world you clearly don't belong in." The words stung, But Evelyn refused to let them show. Instead, she set the plate down gently and straightened up, her posture dignified despite the verbal attack. "I'm here because Alexander invited me," she said simply. "He wanted me to be part of his special day." "Oh, please," Sarah scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Don't pretend this is about him wanting you here. You're clinging to the past, trying to stay relevant in a life that's moved far beyond you." She gestured dismissively at Evelyn's dress, a modest navy blue number that looked perfectly fine to anyone else, but seemed like a crime against fashion in Sarah's eyes. "Even your outfit screams out of place. Honestly, did you think this was appropriate for an event like this?" Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, but she kept her composure. "I dressed appropriately for myself," she responded, her voice steady. "And I came here tonight because Alexander values me, not because I'm trying to prove anything to anyone else." Sarah sneered, leaning in closer now, her voice laced with venom. "Let's not kid ourselves. You're here because you think you can guilt-trip Alexander into giving you handouts or favors. That's what people like you do, isn't it? Prey on kindness and nostalgia." The accusation hung heavy in the air, and the staff froze mid-task, pretending not to listen while secretly absorbing every word. Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "I've never asked Alexander for anything," she said firmly. "Everything he's done for me has been out of gratitude, not obligation. If you can't understand that, then perhaps the problem lies with you, not me." For a moment, Sarah faltered, caught off guard by Evelyn's quiet strength. But she quickly masked her surprise with another wave of mockery. "How noble of you," she spat sarcastically. "Well, enjoy your little moment in the spotlight, Evelyn. Just don't expect it to last." With that, Sarah spun on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving behind a trail of icy silence. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging slightly as the weight of the confrontation settled over her. One of the younger servers approached hesitantly, offering a reassuring smile. "Don't pay her any mind, ma'am. She's full of nonsense." Evelyn managed a small, grateful nod, forcing herself to smile back. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'll be fine." Though she tried to brush it off, the encounter left its mark. Word of Sarah's cruel behavior spread quickly among the household staff, who whispered amongst themselves about the millionaire's wife and her lack of decency. Back in the dining hall, Alexander remained oblivious. For now, but the cracks in his marriage were beginning to widen, and Evelyn, despite her grace under fire, couldn't shake the feeling that this humiliating moment would have lasting consequences. As the evening unfolded, the grand dining hall buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. The guests, a mix of Alexander's business associates, extended family, and close friends, were deeply engrossed in conversations about success, investments, and luxury vacations. But amidst the glitz and glamour, Alexander stood up from his seat at the head of the table, raising his glass to silence the room. His tall frame commanded attention, and within moments, all eyes were on him. "I'd like to take a moment," he began, his deep voice resonating through the room, "to thank someone who has been more than just a caregiver to me. She's been my mentor, my guide, and in many ways, my second mother." He paused, turning his gaze toward Evelyn, who sat quietly near the end of the table. Her cheeks flushed as she realized the spotlight was now on her. "Evelyn Harper," Alexander continued, his tone filled with emotion, "raised me when I had no one else. After my parents passed away, I was lost, a scared little boy without direction. But Evelyn stepped in, not because it was her job, but because she cared. She taught me how to face challenges with courage, how to treat others with kindness, and how to value honesty above all else." He went on to share anecdotes from his childhood. How Evelyn would wake up early to prepare his meals, how she stayed up late helping him with school projects, and how she comforted him during nights when loneliness felt unbearable. Each story painted a vivid picture of a woman whose love and dedication knew no bounds. The guests listened intently, some nodding in admiration, while others exchanged knowing glances. When Alexander finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, overwhelmed by the heartfelt tribute. Several guests leaned over to shake her hand or offer warm words of praise. For a brief moment, Evelyn felt seen, not just as a nanny, but as a person who had made a profound impact on someone's life. But not everyone shared in the sentiment. Sarah, seated beside Alexander, wore a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. While others clapped, she crossed her arms subtly, her fingers tapping against her elbow in quiet irritation. To her, this entire display felt unnecessary. Why dwell on the past? And why give so much attention to someone who, in her mind, was irrelevant to their current lifestyle? As the applause died down, Sarah leaned closer to Alexander, whispering under her breath, "Was all that really necessary? You're a millionaire now, darling. People don't need to hear about your humble beginnings." Her tone was sharp, though she kept her voice low enough that only Alexander could hear. Alexander stiffened slightly, his jaw tightening. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "It's important to remember where you came from," he replied evenly, though there was an edge to his voice. "Evelyn gave me everything I needed to get here. Without her, none of this," he gestured around the lavish room, "would exist." Sarah rolled her eyes discreetly, leaning back in her chair. She couldn't understand why Alexander insisted on clinging to the past. To her, Evelyn was nothing more than a relic of a time long gone, a reminder of struggles that should be forgotten. What mattered now was their present, the wealth, the status, the power. And in Sarah's mind, Evelyn simply didn't fit into that world. Her jealousy simmered just beneath the surface, growing stronger with each passing moment. As the dessert course was served, Sarah found herself staring at Evelyn across the table. How could this unassuming woman command such loyalty and affection from her husband? The thought gnawed at her, planting seeds of resentment that would soon grow into something far more destructive. Unbeknownst to anyone, the harmony of the evening was beginning to crack, and what happened next would leave lasting scars on everyone involved. The grand estate shimmered under the soft glow of chandeliers, its marble floors reflecting the elegance of the evening. Alexander Carter stood at the center of it all, dressed in a tailored suit that matched his commanding presence. It was his 40th birthday, and he had invited his closest family and friends to celebrate the milestone. But tonight wasn't just about him. It was also about honoring someone who had shaped his life in ways no one else could. Mrs. Evelyn Harper arrived quietly, her simple yet neat dress contrasting sharply with the designer gowns and sharp suits filling the room. She carried herself with grace, though she felt slightly out of place among the opulence surrounding her. Evelyn had been more than just a nanny to Alexander. She had been his anchor during the darkest days of his childhood. After losing his parents in a tragic accident when he was only 6, Alexander found solace in Evelyn's care. Her patience, wisdom, and unconditional love became the foundation on which he built his future. As guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, Alexander made his way to Evelyn, his face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Evelyn," he said, taking her hands in his, "I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. You've always been my guiding light." Evelyn smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with pride, as she looked at the man Alexander had become, a successful entrepreneur known for his generosity and integrity. But not everyone shared Alexander's affection for Evelyn. Across the room, Sarah Carter observed the exchange with thinly veiled irritation. Clad in an expensive gown and dripping with jewels, Sarah exuded confidence, but beneath her polished exterior lay a deep insecurity. To her, Evelyn represented everything she despised: simplicity, humility, and a lack of status. As far as Sarah was concerned, this woman didn't belong in their world of wealth and privilege. When Alexander introduced Evelyn to some of the other guests, Sarah's frustration boiled over. She approached them abruptly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Evelyn," she said sweetly, though her tone carried a hint of mockery. It's so lovely to see you again. Tell me, how have you been keeping busy these days?" The question hung in the air, laced with condescension. Evelyn, unfazed by Sarah's tone, replied kindly, "I've been volunteering at a local community center. It's rewarding work." Her response only fueled Sarah's disdain. Volunteering. In her mind, such activities were beneath someone associated with their family. She laughed lightly, glancing around to ensure others were watching. "How quaint," she remarked, drawing a few curious stares from nearby guests. "You must really enjoy staying grounded." Alexander noticed the tension brewing and quickly intervened, steering Evelyn away from Sarah before things escalated. He shot his wife a warning look, but Sarah dismissed it with a shrug. For now, she had planted her seeds of discontent, and the atmosphere in the room shifted ever so slightly. Little did she know, her actions would set off a chain of events that would change everything, for better or worse. The celebration continued, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form, and as the night wore on, it became clear that this reunion was far from ordinary.